Welcome to the Money and Flow podcast, where avocado toast and stocks meet. Did you know that women and women of color don't talk that much about money? And did you also know that the health and wellness community is a $600 billion business? And did you also know that women aren't in the forefront when it comes to decision making with our health and wealth? We're here to change that. This is the first podcast that focuses on wellness and money. This podcast is targeted for women and women of color, specifically in their 20s and 30s. And without further ado, your host, Eugenie George. Hey guys, this is Eugenie George with the Money and Flow podcast. Super excited. I believe this is episode 9, and this is the second of our Hermanas series. As you know, it is National Latino Heritage Day, and we have Aidi Kansas, who is the owner, CEO of Clit Sit, and I call this our sex ed class because we talked a lot about breaking down misconceptions when it comes to our sexual health, our sexual beings. Just to let you know, if you have children in your car, in your home, please, make sure you're wearing headphones. Hey, I'm so happy you're here. Let's talk about creativity and how that affects your everyday life. And I always talk about that when it comes to mental health. And I actually, for 10 years, I stopped singing. What are your thoughts about creativity and mental health?
Thank you for having me.
Yeah.
I love that we're both from New Orleans. I really do.
Oh, me too. I'm always like, oh, who that?
A family member.
Right.
So I think that, we don't merge the spiritual and the creative enough. And anything that we do creative, or good at it or not, it doesn't matter. It's so important to cultivate creativity in your children. And it's something that I work with, with my clients. It's very important to establish what it is that you tap into creatively, because these are the things that feed your spirit. These are the things that keep you whole and get you through the tough times. And so, we're in a place now where art is being taken off the budget, and people don't want to work hard creatively because there's so much competition, and we live in a world where you can't just be, you have to be the best. And so that gets in the way. And so creatively, to not do the thing that you were naturally born to do, is destructive. It's destructive to your well being, it's destructive to your finances, it's destructive to all the things that you want to create.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely have to agree. I think if you're more in tune with being creative and you're more in tune with just checking in with that side, because we both have a right and a left brain, like we're supposed to use all of it. So using both of it definitely does help you with your health as well as wealth. I wanted to talk to you about your health story because I heard about you on That's a Retrograde, and you talked a lot about sexual healing. And I don't know, I think the statistic is like 1 in 4 women have been assaulted. And I think it's 1 in 7 men, which is like I don't know. I mean, it's sad that you don't really hear that from men, but even men have been manipulated sexually. Can you kind of talk to the audience about your health story?
I have interstitial cystitis, and it's a condition, a chronic condition that affects the bladder. So it feels like a untreated UTI, and it's very painful. Uh, Stress sets it off more than anything. Um, and depending how sensitive you are, just in general, emotional, and things like what's happening, current events, um, politics. I mean, I'm just a very sensitive person, so I grew up and I dealt with a very dysfunctional family, a lot of abuse, and a divorce, and lack of stability. Growing up in New Orleans, it was just difficult, and I managed to survive. In my head, I thought I got through everything, and then you go through your teenage years, your 20s and your 30s. I have kids. And so that stress was reconfigured into another form of stress. And because it wasn't abusive like I grew up, my I didn't do enough to take care of myself, mind, body, and spirit. And so after my mom passed away, I started feeling sick and I got diagnosed with IC, um, and it changed my life. I For 2 years I was in bed and on so much drugs, opiates. I didn't know what I was doing. So after doing some research into meditation and different forms of healing, I decided meditation would be the thing that I needed to try, and it was very difficult for me to focus um, on meditate. It's just I have metaphysical ADD. I'll tell you right now. So even though this is what I do for a living, I'll read anything physical, and I'm gone. I'm done after 5 minutes. I'm like, okay,
Right.
QWERTY.
No, I 100%, 100% agree. I think the first time I had taken a meditation class was 10 years ago. And I just took it for a credit in college. I was like, oh, okay, let me just take this. And I didn't get it. I fell asleep like half the time. I just didn't understand what I knew there was benefits, but I couldn't get out of the
Yeah,
it
right.
take and it takes a while. And I always joke, but you probably feel the same way. Like as long as you're trying to be quiet and trying to quiet your brain, that's that's all that matters. It's not about doing the app. It's not about saying that you meditate. It's about actually listening to those thoughts.
Right, right.
But
I do
yeah.
all of them, and then so it's with the meditative of meditation practice that you gain the benefits of meditation, right? So
Hmm.
you have to get to a point where you are meditating every day, or as much as you can, and then you'll get the benefits, and they happen quickly. But we have to put aside the need to have everything be instant gratification too. So we just live in
Yeah.
such a fast-paced society that we don't take the time to care for ourselves. Um, but anyway, so I dealt with my IC, and I tried different types of therapies and different medications, and nothing helped more than meditation. Uh, but it wasn't the regular meditation. It was the one that I created um, that helped me the most.
Yeah, and can you tell us about that? Because that's like I'm very excited to hear about it. Can you tell us
So
a little bit about your meditation practice?
So the meditation that I accidentally kind of bumped into was a meditation that is rooted in tantra, and it's sexual energy. It's infusing sexual energy into your meditation to ground you and keep you focused. And basically, I did this one day when I was meditating, and I was trying to focus, and something told me to hold my clitoris when I was meditating. And when I did, I instantly became focused, and not in a sexual way, in just a soothing, grounded manner. And I thought, there's something to this. What's happening here? And so I meditated, and what would have just been 10 minutes of meditation, easily I was meditating for 45 minutes. And I thought, what's happening? What should I do? Like, after a few days and then a few weeks, I knew I had something. I was meditating every day, sometimes twice a day. It was something that I craved, that I looked forward to doing, and I did gain all the benefits of meditation, and it's true. Plus some. So I did some research into it, and sure enough, it's all tantra, and it's the tapping into igniting the energy that is the creation of everything from a baby to an empire. We can create
Mm-hmm.
anything in this area, the sacral chakra.
Yeah, I 100% agree. I think people forget that it's even when you do yoga, a lot of people will want to hurry up and rush and do the flow and not focus on the chakras. And that's actually the thing that keeps you grounded.
Right, right. And understanding um, that the East and the West, the differences in their approaches to healing. But when it comes to sex, we all are sexually oppressed, and especially women of color. I feel growing up in a Latin home in a community where we didn't talk about sex. My uh, introduction into sex was more like a public service announcement. It was very much what we cannot do, how to protect ourselves, not with condoms or birth control, but just by uh, not dressing provocatively, not gaining attention, um, not going overboard with flirting. So it was all preventative in that way. Let's make you terrified of, you know, and being yourself authentically, unapologetically. It was none of that. It was fear, fear, fear.
Oh, yeah. No, my family's from a Baptist. I mean, we're from the South, so like little. I'm not gonna throw out the name, but yeah. Anyways, it was the same thing,
Right.
and I remember being a kid, and I remember being. This is crazy because I don't think I've ever told this story, but I remember being 13, and I really liked this guy, and instead of me talking to someone about liking them, the whole conversation was like, you better make sure you close your legs, girl. You got to make sure you stay pure, and you don't realize that all of that, even those words, first of all, no one is, I mean, I don't know what pure means. You know what I'm saying? So how could you say that? But
It's conditioning. It's
yeah.
mhm.
And I just had I actually just went to like a Black Girls Magic retreat, which was pretty crazy. But
Where was that at?
yeah, so actually my friend just put it on. She just got a bunch of women, and we do this thing in Philadelphia. It's called the Connect, where Black and Brown founders come together. And that's a little plug, I guess. Yeah. Yeah. And so we do this thing where we come together and like we'll chat, and kind of everybody who is of Latin. And sometimes we have Asian cultures. We need to do more on that. But yeah, we come together once a month and we just enjoy each other because most of us work in areas that are primarily white spaces. So we just like kind of relax and let loose. So we did this retreat, and I kid you not, every single woman in there had some form of uh, our sexual identities were definitely coming through, because we were all like doing yoga and everyone was really open. And I most people had all these scenarios that had to do with sex, and the fact that that was like one of the few times that I was able to freely talk about it. Like now, that's why I kind of started the podcast, because I'm like, okay, we're going to talk about money as well as health and how that's important, how that
Right.
affects our mental health. But that was the first time I in my 31 years of living had an open conversation about sexuality with a bunch of girls that looks like me.
Right?
And right? Like we'll have the like, you know, you'll have the haha, like, yeah, girl, and you know, talk to that guy. But
Right.
having a real conversation of what does healing look like is
Right.
that's a
And
really small.
what I noticed immediately was my own limitations on how I was going to first talk about something that I was doing with my clitoris. That was a big one. Like
Yeah.
I needed, do you know that I did this for a year? I meditated, I did Clit Sit for a year before I came out public with it because that's how oppressed I was. The thought of talking to people, having it's not so much talking to women, but really just knowing that I'm in the same room or on a podcast and men would be hearing um, about me and my body and a sexual way
Yeah.
felt just invasive and a little terrifying. Um, and so I had to deal with that fear. Um, and the more I dealt with it, the more I found ways to empower myself and become more vocal in handling and connecting with people that were maybe stepping over the line. So I learned how to speak up for myself through this meditation. I learned um, that this work is needed and it's
Mm-hmm.
more important for me to just put it out there, get the information out there, help people than it is to worry about, how people are going to view me, um,
Yeah.
judge me. And they have, and everything I feared kind of came true. There was, all of it was relevant. It's my I found a way to generate a new response though, so that's what made the difference.
That's amazing. I think I'm on the same page as you because I had given up dating for a year and then also had given up sex for a year. That's why when I heard about your I said, "Girl, I did that. Like I did the like meditating every day. I do the exact same like now what you have a business because of I was like, you know what? Stuff's happening down there. Like I don't really know. I didn't know what was going on. And I remember the first like you I would love to hear your experiences, but I remember the first 2 months was pure denial. Like why it was like first of all, why am I doing this? And then the second was how can how can I like just be myself without thinking about having a guy? Or like, how can I be myself without being having to have sex? Like there was a lot of denial, like, no, you have to be with the guy, you have to be with the man, you need to go and find a relationship. Like I know that sometimes women have the like, I'm living my best life, I'm being single, but there was still that constant like back in the back of my mind, like, oh, I should be dating, oh, I should be doing this.
Ultimately, happiness equals marriage, a house, and the whole
Right.
thing.
Right.
But that's conditioning. I am against all of it. I'm okay with marriage if you want to be married, but it's recognizing that um, who we are is uh, the vibration that we operate in and the frequency in the world. And that is the energy that attracts money and potential partners and friends. And all of this is working with, like I said, the sexual energy that's housed in the sacral chakra and in the root chakra. But you can't access it if you grew up like I did and like so many of us did, where we fear our sexuality. And so you notice that the cisgendered male has no problem with their sexuality and the global permission to masturbate and just act out on, live authentically.
Right.
And this matches, their ability to bring in abundance. So
Yeah.
this is what I saw, this is what I experienced, and so my exposure to tantra made it more accessible to fine tune this meditation so that I can communicate this to women and women of color especially.
I know you mentioned males too. Do you have some clients that are males?
Oh yeah, no, I work with men, and men need healing. Men need healing bad. They
Mm-hmm.
are only celebrated in a way that is, toxic masculinity. You're not
Yeah.
allowed to break down. You're not allowed to emote, and sensitive men are not as celebrated. That's a problem. It's a problem for women, and it's a problem for our society. And just look what's happening in our politics. That is, this is what you get.
Yeah. I don't know if you've heard what's Lewis Howes. Have you heard of Lewis Howes? He's a author, an entrepreneur, and he has a podcast as well. But it's like very the podcast is very like, yeah, go out there, be an entrepreneur, do it. He has a lot of like cool people on there. But I think one of the things that kind of struck me that was unique about him was that he wrote a letter talking about how he was sexually assaulted as a or how he was molested as a child. And this is like a big guy, muscular, like on an Olympic something team,
Right.
and was talking about all of that denial and in all of his anger, just spewing out in different ways his relationships, the people that he loved. And I think he said he received like millions of letters after he opened up about this scenario, and tons of them were like, thank you so much for being honest and open. And I think I live in Philly, and I've lived on the East Coast before, and the East Coast and West Coast is very different vibes. But
Mhm.
it always seems like whenever someone is very honest and open, everybody's open. So,
It takes it just takes one person.
right.
That
So
takes
even
one person to
yeah,
listen to you.
exactly. So even the clit set, what, like us just having a conversation about it, people are now going to be interested in, okay, well, what is she talking about? Like,
Right,
does
right.
this, right?
Well,
Um,
I chose the name. I mean, I've always been successful with my businesses. And had I had this information with my last business, who knows? But I'm a painter, and I had a portrait business
mhm.
for 18 years, and pet portraits, by the way. But I worked with a lot of animal rescues, and so my creative energy has always been there. And like I said, it was something that I worked on and cultivated from the time I was a child. But there was always something missing, and the way that I would approach my business,
Mm,
finances, all of it. And it wasn't until I understood how sexual energy works with our business mind, that I understood, how essential it is, how crucial it is, in terms of attracting energy, in people. And it's something that doesn't just stay central to where we are. It crosses the ocean and the countries, and it goes to
yeah,
places. It is. It's
yeah.
like the butterfly effect. So when I was trying to think of a name for this meditation, I went full on. I wanted to tackle the thing that I felt was the hardest to communicate and talk about, which is the clitoris. And so that's why I named it Clit Sit, because I want to take the stigma out of female sexuality. I haven't always been this way. I am that person that is shy about talking, about sex and masturbation, and these are subjects that I'm still working through,
Mm-hmm.
um, and only because I was molested, and I've worked through my sexual trauma, and so this is a spiritual assignment for me,
Mm-hmm.
and it's something that, because it's so hard, it's something I'm determined to do. It's not supposed to be easy. It's supposed to be gut wrenching, but doing podcasts and showing up and just spreading the message about sexual empowerment and how it's tied to our finances and our businesses as women and men too. That's what it's all about.
Yeah, I get it.
I think that one of the biggest things or the biggest issues that we have about each other or about culturally is that, or the other thing about, especially when it comes to white males, which I have no qualms against white male, my partner's white, so there's no, in order for us to like start a movement, feminism, finances, anything that has to do with making growth and alleviating poverty, we have to do things differently. So we cannot do anything when it has to do with our finances the same way as a man does it. We can't, because ancestrally, that is not how we were programmed to be. Yes, the principles, just like Napoleon Hill, are correct, right? You should have
Right.
principles. You need to believe in it. There's vibration, there's attraction. But, you know, being African American, there was this bank called Freeman Bank in Philadelphia, and that was the bank that was opened after slavery. So President Abraham Lincoln got all this a bunch of people and said, all right, Black people, we're going to put a bank out there for you. The bank was out there, and it turns out like a bunch of African Americans were saving, and Philadelphia was flourishing. They had a book, it's called Black City Makers, and this was like a great experience. However, the bank ended up only lending to white people. So you have a bank that was all the white people were saving, and the lenders. So if any of the lenders bounced on their payments, it was affecting the African Americans, right? So and there's so many other things. There's like the Chinese Exclusionary Act. There's a eugenics crusade. There's all these things in the past 50 to 60 years that have to do with our health and our wealth. I mean, you can even draw back dermatology. They used to literally take Native Americans, take African Americans, and make them test dummies. So all of that stuff's ancestral. And like we really do have to break that curse, whatever that is. So I actually wanted to talk to you about sort of your business practices, because I know for a fact, I know in my heart of hearts, like, one, you're breaking through and making sure that people hear like the calling of their spirituality in terms of sexual healing. Can you talk to me about how you're you're making it as a business owner and healing people? Because I think that that's something that's really beneficial. And I think that there's probably a lot of people that want to start a business that has a spiritual practice, but particularly, unless you're going to church, sometimes which is not a problem, but like, I think people only see it as like life coaching, church, and that's it. So could you like talk to us about your practices? Because you are literally breaking a curse for a lot of people.
So I live in New Orleans, and there is a lot of spirituality here, whether it's Haitian Creole influence, Christian, Baptist. There's a little of everything, and I believe that my exposure to Tantra and understanding how men in religious and political um, in the religious and political world have affected the success, the progress of women, and by sexually oppressing us, and this is what patriarchy is. It's reinforced by men and women, and so I recognized that over the years, doing this work, and whether I started off as a psychic medium, which I did, And then I realized that we all have this ability. So instead of making myself, this very precious individual that is, gifted with intuition and spiritual, intuitive abilities, um, I decided that people need to develop their own intuition. They need to believe that this is something that needs to be explored regardless of what your religious affiliation is, what you've been told is allowed to be explored in the sixth sense. We're very limited. I grew up Catholic, and so this was something that we had to. You have to be careful with how you deal with this type of the spirit world. Um, so learning that we have access to spirit and to our spirituality, and tie it to your business, tie it to whatever it is that you're trying to um, accomplish is the most, I think, is the most important thing. So you've heard when people say the family that prays together stays together. You everything that you do, if you do it to heal, to better the world, I really believe that you'll be successful at it. But you have to believe it, and you have to do the thing that you want to do with all of your heart. And I believe that those things will line up.
Hey, I'm super happy that you're here. I think Aidi and I were talking so much we forgot to plug in her social media. So if you would like to speak to Aidi, you can find her on Instagram at Aidi Kansas. Or if you'd like to talk to her and set up a personal session, you can look at her website, which is entitled Aidi Kansas. I'll make sure I put those on the show notes. And as always, I'm super happy that you took your time out to listen to this podcast. If you'd like to chat with me, catch me on the DM. You can find me at Money and Flow podcast at Instagram. Or if you'd like to just chat with us or even be interviewed, you can email me at moneyandflowpodcast@gmail.com. I really hope you had a good week. There was a lot of sexual healing. I just hope that this helps us because there's a lot of very interesting things happening, particularly when it comes to politics and our sexual education. Thanks so much.